follow where the client is leading you, and you can't go wrong.
Yes, and my point being with this is that in theory, in a session, you could end up maybe going through 3 or 4 of these. But
Absolutely.
now, like your hour's up,
Yeah.
okay, is there a way with this that you absolutely make sure that you're leaving them in
a
that
good
place,
place,
and yet you both know that you're still, we've got some more things to go on here because we haven't resolved the whole thing.
It's a great question. Taking this exact example, let's say I did the first part on the fainting, and that works out great. And then we test it, and it turns out there's a little bit of tension still on the general scenario. So we know we're not done, but we know that was a significant improvement, right? So then my question is, you know, our time here is coming up for this moment. Are you okay? Is there anything that you need to happen okay for you to go home now and let this part of the experience settle in, so when you come back the next time, we can address the rest of it? And if they say no, then you end up doing whatever needs to happen at that point. You've got to see where they're at to put them in a good context again, and then they can go home. And if they say yes, then you go, great. You bring them back, and you basically have a holding pattern. It's like the cliffhanger in a movie. And when they come back, they go right back to where they left off, and off you go. A nice holding pattern, by the way, is to remind people that this happened already. They managed to deal with it in the past, and somehow it went to a place where it was appropriate so they can get on with a normal life, and it had minimal impact on them, right? You can remind them that, and now you're actually revivifying it. So, as you are sitting here right now, you use your language, you're sitting here right now, I'd like you to recognize that that place exists, and that this part of the experience can go there, safely protected, protecting you until the next time comes, so we can continue the session and finish off what we're doing, right? So we're just creating a little holding pattern for them. And in the power loops, we talk about holding patterns within that as well as other things, but that's really what we're doing. Make sense? I believe over here, someone wants, Adam here, and then someone in the back.
Yeah, there's the part where her father came into the room, and I caught the bit about sharing the emotions, and I know it ended with forgiveness. I didn't get the wording of the process to go through that.
The point with this, there's a little 6-year-old girl, and had a big shock, and there could be a unconscious resentment because daddy should have been there to protect it, prevent this from happening, right? Now, the adult can recognize that he's not God Almighty, can't always be there and do it, but the little girl might still think like, he should have been there for me because that's what daddies do, right? Okay. So we're now dealing with, remember we talked about anger before? We're now actually dealing with the anger that's still left. It wasn't a huge amount, but enough that it might maintain a pattern. So we say, look, I'm reframing the adult. Like, you don't recognize that he's doing the best he can, he's only human, and you know, he couldn't really do anything about this, sure. Although the little girl would still have liked it. So now you express the sentiment the little girl never got a chance to.
So the little girl is in that room then with the dad? Or?
I usually let the adult do it because the adult's the one that's going to be having the rest of their life. So it's like, look, you tell him what she couldn't tell him. So, and this is usually good, particularly for bigger things. For example, if you're dealing with abuse cases, the little girl might not have the courage to do it, so the adult might be the one that needs to do it. And in those cases, by the way, you may have to put in special symbols to protect the adult even further from, say, an abuser. For example, let's say it's like a rape case. You have the rapist being there tied up and gagged, so they can really tell them what they think, but the rapist is powerless, so it's changed the power structure. Then instead of using the word forgiveness, it's just like saying, just cut the cord, let him go, he's not important anymore, you get to move on, and he gets to disappear because you're safe now, etc., etc. So we need to separate, well, basically, that person is still living on inside them and becomes a focus of anger or hatred, but really it's inside them, so it's focused on themselves anyway. So we get over that piece so that there's no more negative spin in there at all, because even a low-level current can build up into something bigger again in the future. Does that kind of make sense? In this case, it's easy because it was a dad, so there's a lot of love and affection there anyway. The situation was obviously not out of his control, and the adult recognized that. So it's very easy to do that reframe. If the reframe is harder to do, we go back to the idea of intention versus behavior. That's why we talked about the whole thing. And we talk about how, he's got his own problems, he's all messed up, he shouldn't have done it, the behavior is bad, but you can at least understand why it happened. You don't have to accept that it happened, but you can understand why. And that's the big difference. That's when you shift from behavior bad, but the person couldn't help it type thing, And then instead of holding on because it shouldn't have happened, it's more like, okay, it did happen, and it shouldn't have happened, but it did. So now we can just cut the cord, let it go, and I get to move on without having to carry fear or anger or regret or anything like that with me, because I just get to enjoy life. Because who wants to live life being angry at the world? I mean, you've seen people like this, right? Is that healthy? Is that a good way to live life? They might have a right to be angry, but it doesn't help them in any way. See what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's the piece we're clearing up there. It's very minor here, but you may as well do a thorough job. So typically, you regress on the emotion, clear that, and then you check if any of the players there need to come in and have some kind of forgiveness going on, or a cutting of the cord, or letting go, so that there's no resentment underlying, still vibrating in the background somewhere. Basically, you're clearing the slate as much as you can physically do, and then reintegrate, bring the person up with all those resources. And you saw, like, the first time, you were pretty happy, right? The second time, you could see her, like, almost bursting, like, light coming out of the skin from sheer joy. And it's a significant change, right? And that's partly because we removed both of the negative emotions, the tension as well as the fainting, but also, I think, partly because of the forgiveness thing. You let go of that one person whose resentment might tarnish the whole experience. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
It's a great question. There's one over here. Go ahead.
Igor, would you do anything different if the ISE happened at a time before the client learned to talk?
No. I mean, I put my voice thing with it so that the meaning gets conveyed. So I just do the same thing. Now, if for some reason something strange happened, just so you guys know, I've never actually had something like this happen to me where someone was pre-talking stage, so I haven't done it, right? But my initial thing is just to do it anyway. And if something came up in the process that disallowed that, then I deal with it then. But the whole point of the boilerplates is that the boilerplates 1 are the important ones. Boilerplate 2 are okay. Boilerplate 1 is really important because the sound of my voice will go with you. The meaning behind my words will continue to guide you. Particularly important here because is that Dutch, is that right? So I don't speak Dutch. So I'm not going to start going into, and do you speak English when you were 6 years old? No. So I'm making sure that the meaning of my words still follow her. Incidentally, we didn't have a full regression, we had a revivification here, right? You saw that, right? Compared to James, who had a full regression. But you notice how it doesn't matter. The revivification or regression, there's a window between the two that's okay. It's between hyperamnesia and revivification. That's the bit where the work gets very shady, right? Just a little aside. Does that make sense to you? Does that answer your question as well? Any more? Okay, folks, give it a nice round of applause. Thank you so much for doing this.